Welcome back to Chapter 4 of the Python Automation Training course. My name is Carlos Kidman, and for this chapter we're going to be talking about models and services. Honestly, I think it's better just to see this one in action, so I won't be explaining anything, we'll just dive right into code. So this is where we left off in the last chapter. We had created a couple of tests, and you may have more because of the challenges, but we wanted to see that the spirit's details were displayed. And this test got a little bit spicy because of the different things we had to do, and the complex logic was actually done inside of the test, which is why the second test looks so much bigger than our first test. To make matters even worse, right now we're only testing the iSpirit card, when there's so many more cards on that page. So what we're going to do right now to demonstrate that is actually test another card. So we want to make sure that for the next test, we're going to be doing it for the mirror card. So let's grab this, copy, and we'll paste it here down below. And then let's make sure we format the good stuff here. That way we don't have to worry about that. 3, 4, pow. And then instead of iSpirit, we're going to test a new card called Mirror, which is a spell. Now everything here is almost going to remain the same except for, well, this card by name right here is Mirror. And then what we're asserting as well. So we're no longer asserting for Mirror. This is not a troop, it's a spell. This is found in Arena 12. And this is not common, this is epic. So that was a lot of code to copy when really we only changed 5 values. Hopefully you're seeing that the scripting mentality or the scripting approach to test automation doesn't scale very well. It's pretty weak actually. So the first thing we're going to do is the model side of this chapter. We're going to create a model which is representation of the card. We know 4 things about the card right now. We know that it has a name, a type, an arena, and a rarity. So we're going to represent this using a class. We'll start by making a new directory within our Royale folder. We'll go here, new, make a new Python package, and we're going to call this one models. Within this, we're going to make a new file, and this one we're just going to call card.py. Now in C# we call these pocos, or in Java, pojos, so I'm assuming that in Python we call them popos, aka police, what? So in here, let's create our class called card. So we're going to say class card. Let's create the initializer here. And now we're going to pass in the 4 values that we know of. We know of name, which is a string. We know of type, which is also a string. Our arena, which is actually an integer, because we want like 8 or 12 or 1. We don't want to say arena 12 or arena 8. So that was something we'll have to change in our test. And then lastly, the rarity as well, which we know is a string. The last part is really easy. We'll just create these fields. So self.name is going to equal the name we pass in. Self.type is going to equal the type we pass in. Self.arena, I think you're getting the idea here. And then self.rarity is equal to the rarity. With that, our model is done. We can now use this model inside of our card details page to actually grab the information off of the page and turn it into our card object. So let's switch over to our card details page. And then here we're finally going to start adding some stuff to this class. The first thing I'm going to want to do though is to add a method that allows me to get the card type and arena off the page a little more easily, because right now we're doing that inside of our test and it's pretty complicated. So let's do that first. Alright, so I'm going to call this one get card type and arena. And this is actually going to return a tuple with the type is a string and then the arena is an integer. Let's bring this in. It's typing.tuple. Alright, now I'm going to hold a variable. I'm going to call this one type and arena is equal to self.map. And we call this one category for now because we didn't really know what name to give it. But we're actually going to grab the text out of this and then split it by that comma space. The card type is pretty straightforward. So card type is equal to the type in arena, and it's just the first one, right? Because we actually have right here, we had troop, comma, arena 8 is kind of what we had. So once we split it in the middle, the first one is troop. So there's our type. That one is pretty straightforward. The card arena is a bit spicier just because we have to do one more transformation here. So let's go type and arena. It's the second element in here, but this would be arena space 8. And so this I want to split as well, and I want to split it by that space. And then I want to grab the last element in there. So I'm actually going here. I have this now. Then I'm going to split it by the space here. And then I want the last element, which would be this 8. Now we're not done yet because that would be a string of 8. So we'd want to convert that into an integer. And fortunately in Python, that's actually pretty easy to do. So I'm going to say return my card type. And then return the integer value of card arena. And this method is now done. The next method we'll make is that card representation I was talking about. So I'm going to call this one get base card, just because there's so many details on the page and we're really only getting the base information off of it, which we defined in our model. Now this is going to be returning an actual card object. So let's bring this in. There we go. And I'll start with my type and arena, and we'll use our get card. Oops. Should be self.getCard. There we go. Now we have that tuple of type and arena. Then I want to return a new card. And here we're going to say the name is self.map.cardName right here. Grab the text out of that. The next one is the type. We want the type to be equal to type and arena, and give me the first element within the tuple, which would be the type. Same thing for the arena. Type and arena, but now we're doing the second element. And then lastly, rarity, we have self.map.cardRarity. Get the text out of this, and then when you do that whole fancy split thing, just like we had in the test. Boom. There we go. So now we can go back to our test and update it with the new stuff. So right here, we're getting to the mirror page, and then we're doing all this fluff right here. When in reality, we don't need all of this. All we really need is the card on the page. So once we're here, let's get the base card. Now that we have it, notice I'm calling it card on line 42. Now I can just change each of these. Instead of saying card underscore name, we actually can just say card dot name, because that's part of our card object. Card dot type, card dot arena, and card dot rarity. Look how much we just cleaned up because we decided to make a model and put that complex logic into our page object. Now let's run the test, of course, to make sure that things are working correctly. And we get an error. Well, the error is because if you notice here, we're saying assert that 12 is equal to arena 12. If you remember, we actually changed this to be an integer. So let's make sure that we update our tests instead of saying arena 12 to just say the integer of 12. Run it again, and the test should pass. All right, now we're going to talk about the services side. And the service really just serves you things, right? Good example of this would be you want to be able to create a test user, and so you create a user service or a user factory that will actually generate or serve up these users for you to drive your test. What we're going to be doing here is something very similar, but using cards. So I'm in Postman right now, and hopefully you can see I'm going to use a get here. Here's the URL I'm going to be sending the request to. And then a simple send, I'll post it. A simple send will actually return me a list of cards. Now notice that each one of these cards looks kind of like our model that we created in our project, right? The name, rarity, type, arena. Granted, these have a few more values, but this is a list of all the cards that are possible to have inside of the Stats Royale game. Lots of them that we don't currently think about, like Earthquake and Royal Giant. I don't play this game, so I didn't know about them. It's just my job to test them. And luckily, this API has given me all the information I need for all the cards, their values, in a nice, simple list and API to grab them. So what we're about to do right now is we're going to call this exact same API endpoint and get this list of cards into our code. So let's switch back over to code and let's create our card service. Alright, first things first, we need to install the library that communicates with these endpoints. So I'm going to open up my terminal, and inside of here I'm going to run pip install requests. Right on. Now that that's done, let me close these, and now I should be able to make a new Python package. We're going to call this one services. Inside of services, we're going to make a new file, and we're going to call this one cardservice.py. I want my service to be able to do two things. Number one, I want it to get me a list of all the cards that are available in our database. And number two, I want it to get a single card by the name I pass in. So let's start with the first function. This one we're going to call def get all cards. Pretty straightforward. And this is going to return me a list of card objects. Now let's bring these in. Yes, there's my card. And we want to bring in typing.list. Okay, now we're going to call that endpoint. I'm going to say the response is equal to request dot, and let's bring this in real quick first. Yep, requests dot get, and here we're just going to pass in that URL, which was statsroyale.com/API/cards. We're going to make sure the response was okay. So if response was okay, then huzzah, we can actually return the list back. And I'm going to use some list comprehension here to do it. Now this is some advanced Python stuff, so just follow along for now, just so you can see what's happening. If you want to dive more into this, remember this is called a list comprehension in Python. Make sure to search for that, and hopefully this part makes more sense for you later on. In the meantime, I'm going to say card for card in response.json. So let's break this down just a little bit because it looks kind of cool what we're doing, but you may be lost a little bit, and that's okay. So what I'm saying is for every card in response.json, which if we look back at Postman, our response is just a list of these card objects. For each one of these, I want to make a brand new card instance and unpack that JSON into it, giving me a new instance of card. All very cool, and hopefully it's something that you guys have been able to kind of keep up with. If not, don't worry about it. Research on your own time, and it'll start to make sense eventually. Promise. All right, now we're saying if the response was okay, give me the list back. However, if it was not okay, that means that something else happened. We got a different status code, an error happened, I lost connection to the internet, something else that not good happened, right? So I'm going to say if my response is not okay, I'm going to raise an exception, and I'm just going to say something like response was not okay. The status code that I got back was, let's do response.statuscode. But that's it. I mean, look how easy it was for us to get what we had in Postman and then convert it into code in Python. It was actually super simple. Let's quickly write the second function, which is to get a card by a name. So let's go here. I'm going to say def get card by name, and we're going to pass in a card name. Now this has to be a string, or else you're messing me up. And instead of a list of card, this is a single card we're returning back. Now unfortunately, these guys don't have an endpoint where you can actually pass in a card name or an ID to get a single card. So we're going to do something here where we're going to grab all the cards and then filter through them to grab the single card that we want. So cards equals get all cards. Now we have them all. and then return the next one, or return the first one, really is what this should say. Return the next card for card in cards if card.name is equal to the card name we pass in. Again, all that list comprehension stuff can look kind of confusing. Don't worry about it for now. Just copy what we have here and continue on with the video. Alright, we're in the home stretch, y'all. So let's go back to our tests. And now we're going to use that service. So let's make some space here. And I'm going to say cards is equal to my card service. And let's bring this in. Yep. Get all cards. Perfect. And now we're going to leverage a feature from PyTest that allows us to parameterize our tests. Or, and a better way to say it is create test cases for our test methods. Right now, this one test method is only working for iSpirit. But really, we would want to make sure that every card that exists, we check if it's displayed. We can do this by using PyTest. So let's say at PyTest. We'll have to bring this in. Then .mark.parameterize. The first value is the argument name. And we're just going to call this card in string form. The second value is where those values are coming from. In this case, it's our list of cards. We then need to call our card inside of our function right here. And now we can actually use the card inside of our test. So here, instead of saying iSpirit, we could change this to say card on page. This one as well, card on page. And the name we want to get back is card.name. Take a moment to look through the test real quick. If we were to go through our Postman response body here, the first object we have back is this canon. So the card.name is canon. If I go back over to my test, we can think of card as equal to canon the first time it goes through. If we do that, then we say, all right, make me a new Chrome driver, go to statsroyale.com, go to the cards page, and the card on page is going to equal cardspage.getCardByName canon. Assert that canon is displayed. The second time it goes through the test, it's going to go to the next one, which is now earthquake. Go back to the test here, and instead of canon, we now have earthquake. In all caps, because earthquakes are crazy. But now, the card on page is going to equal earthquake. And line 20 will read, assert earthquake is displayed. Well, because we've now made our test very generic, it's no longer just testing iSpirit, it's testing all the cards. So I'm going to replace this test iSpirit is displayed with just test card is displayed. Because it's actually going to go through all of our cards, I mean every single card that we got back from the API, and it's going to assert that each one of them is displayed correctly. The last update I'll make here is just to make sure I call this one API card, just to differentiate between the card we have on the page and the API card we're getting from, well, the API. With that, I think this first test is complete. For this next test, we'll do the same thing. At pytest.mark.parameterize. We'll have our API card, and we're using our list of cards. So we'll put an API card here. Perfect. The first line is line 27. This is no longer just iSpirit. This is API card.name. And now that we have this, we have the card on the page versus the API card. Remember, if the first time we go through, it's canon, canon is not going to equal iSpirit. Fortunately for us, because we're using models, and we are making sure the pages are grabbing cards off the page and our APIs are also grabbing cards, we can compare apples to apples at this point. So I can actually say, here we have card, which is on the page, should be equal to the card we got from the API, aka API card.name. And hopefully you just had a aha moment, because now this makes super duper sense. The card type should be equal to the API card.type. The card on the page's arena should be API card.arena. So what we're doing here is we're saying whatever is on the page should match what we're getting back from our API. The cards should be equal. Let's add one space right here, so we're sticking with PEP guidelines and standards. But with that, we've now generalized our test. So again, just like our first test, line 24 here, we're not just testing iSpirit anymore, we're testing every single card that exists in the game. Cool thing about this is that we no longer need this third test because we're testing mirror already. In fact, we're testing all the cards. So really we just need these two tests. Are the cards displayed correctly, and then are we getting the details correctly as well? With these two tests, I can tell you right now that if we were to run them, you'd run about 93 or 94 tests per test method because there's 93 or 94 cards that exist in the game. So each one of these test methods is now 93 separate test cases. So now, if you think about it, there's almost 200 test cases that we've written with these two test methods alone. Pretty powerful stuff, I would say. The last thing we'll do to finish off this chapter is to make sure that our model is matching what's actually happening in the API. In the API, we actually have other values or other fields, ID, icon, and cost. We don't currently have these inside of our model, so we need to make sure to include these as well. Back on our code, let's make sure we go to our model here, card.py, and we're going to include these now. So let's put ID right here. We'll have ID, which is an integer. We'll have our cost, which is an integer as well. And then we had icon, which was a string. And then let's include all of these. So self.id is equal to ID, self.cost is equal to cost, and self.icon is equal to icon. Perfect. Let's go back to one of our tests and let's try running one of these. Now I'm going to end it kind of halfway through because otherwise it's going to just run forever and I don't really want that. So let me just run for a little bit and I'll see you back here soon. For the next chapter, we're going to be going over the WebDriver a little more because right now we've been using Selenium right out of the box to create these page objects and these tests. These tests have been getting cleaner and cleaner, but I'll admit that we're still doing some copying of code. I mean, if you look at lines 15 and 16 and 25 and 26, they're the exact same lines of code. Another thing is this part here, this whole cards page driver, is a little bit cryptic still. It still doesn't read as easily as it could, and I think we could clean that up. So in the next chapter, when we start customizing and extending the WebDriver, we'll be cleaning these up as well. See you then.